Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the February 4th Board of Education budget meeting. If we can please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance Again, good evening. Welcome everyone at home, everyone here in the audience. Thank you for coming. Erin, roll call, please. Oh, here. We need it.
Here. Here.
Here.
All right, so just getting right into business, we have the superintendent's report and our presentation for tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Lucetti. We're going to invite the board and the central office administrators into the audience so that you can see the presentation behind us. This evening's meeting is dedicated to a budget presentation on revenue and reserves, and we're going to throw in a little bit of fiscal stress monitoring as well. Okay, so good evening, everyone, and welcome to the community members who are here or listening in at home. This evening is one of many budget presentations that we will do over the course of the next several months, leading up to the budget vote and school board trustee election in May. So this evening we have two elements being presented, and those are going to be shared from our district treasurer, Tiana Belcastro, and our assistant superintendent for business and operations, Mr. Frank Bakke. So without further ado, I'm going to invite the two of them up to begin the presentation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Graham, and thank you to everyone listening. So today, we're going to give you an overview. We're going to look at, as Dr. Graham mentioned, fiscal stress monitoring system is the first part of the presentation, which Tiana's going to go over. The last update we gave on this was in August 30th. We sent through a board update, which these results are on the 23-24 school year. So after we complete the audit, Tiana does a projection of where we think we're going to land with the fiscal stress, and she's going to share those results. What we did report in August 30th did come to be actually what is reported by the comptroller's office now in January. So that's what we're going to share first. Next, I'm going to go over the estimated revenue. There were some changes because we finalized a few more numbers on the property tax cap. And then we're going to take a look at state aid. As the governor's budget did come out in January, we have some updates to share as well. And then we're going to conclude with what's next, so you can see what presentations are coming and the important budget dates. Okay, so without further ado, Tiana.
Thank you, Frank. Good morning. Good evening, Board of Education, and those at home and the community members out supporting this presentation tonight. I'm going to take a few minutes to go over the fiscal stress results from our 23-24 school year. So what is the fiscal stress monitoring system? This was developed by the State Comptroller's Office. They have the fiscal responsibility to examine and report on the results of operations for all local governments. And to do so, to analyze these local governments on equal playing fields, they developed this fiscal stress monitoring system. There are two indicators that are examined in this system. We have financial indicators that are basically the results of district operations, and environmental indicators that are really outside of the district's control. As you can see, there are scoring system on our second half of the slide here. In school, hundreds, what everybody wants to aim for. In the business office for this report, we say less is more. So looking at our results for the 23-24 school year, we are pleased to report that we've received no designation for both fiscal stress and environmental stress. And then going forward, we would like to maintain this by really having prudent, stable budgeting practices to minimize the likelihood of operating deficits. And we also want to keep our stable fund balance to ensure that we have enough revenue on hand in case there's any unanticipated shortfalls or expenditure deficits. Now, does anybody have any questions on this before I hand it over to Frank? Okay, thank you. And now the most important part of the presentation.
Okay, thank you, Tiana. Okay, so for the estimated revenue and use of financial resources, so starting here with a property tax cap, which is our largest revenue source, you can see that the updated projection we have now for the 25-26 school year is $75.9 million. So that represents a 2.15% increase. So as of today, that would be our property tax cap number. We're waiting on a few more numbers just to finalize the report with the Comptroller's Office that are related to the retirement system. If those do change, it's not going to have a major impact, so we would expect this to be very close, if not the final number on the property tax cap. Okay. The next line here is state aid, so that also has changed from the presentation we gave in January. As you recall, that was based on the current year law, what our projections would be for 25-26. When the governor's budget comes out, that redoes our projection, and then we base it based off of that. And I'll go into a little more of detail as to how that number is derived, but you can see it's a 7.5% increase, which is very favorable, and more than we had expected. Local revenue, we're expecting a 1.43% increase, so it's our smallest revenue source. That primarily is derived of our rental agreement with BOCES for the Brennan Building, and also we do receive money for interest income, as well as just miscellaneous revenue in terms of if we have any insurance recoveries. That all goes into that bucket of local revenue. Fund balance, we are projecting right now to stay stable, so we're going to use the same amount of fund balance in our budget as we did last year, so there's no change to that. And that would bring the total revenue and financial resources to a 4.5% increase. So that is the bottom line in terms of the budget. When you're voting for Proposition 1, that is the total expense budget. It equals the revenue and financial resources. So it would be $152.3 million. Is the projection as of today. Okay, so digging a little bit more into the property tax cap. So that was our prior year result, was 74,266,835. That's the 24-25 property tax. Our allowable levy growth factor is 2%. So inflation came in higher than 2%, so we're allowed to increase the base of the property tax cap by 2%. And then when we factor in the exclusions, the largest one being the capital tax levy exclusion, that brings us to a 2.15% increase. And for us, in terms of dollar amounts, that's equivalent to just under $1.6 million. Okay, this slide here is a bit of a new one, so I'm going to walk through it a little bit more slowly. So this is a 5-year property tax cap projection. We haven't historically provided this, but I thought it would be a nice idea because you can see there may be some changes in the future, so I'll walk through kind of why that is. So you can see the 2.15% is what we're projecting for 25-26. And now this projection assumes a 2% property tax cap levy statewide for the remainder of those years. So it assumes inflation is going to be 2% or higher. Now the reason why in the next 2 years you can see it would go from 1.49% down to a negative 0.25% has to do with that capital tax levy exclusion. And I'll show on the next slide a little bit more detail on kind of how that works. But the simplest way to kind of phrase it is the property tax levy, it is based on a base amount, and the exclusion amount is always adjusted after the fact. So for example, if we had, this year, if we had a property tax cap levy that was above 2% because we have exclusion data, when we calculate next year's property tax cap, we strip out those exclusions, our base tax levy goes up by the 2%, and then we add in the new exclusions for the projected year. And that mechanism is why you have fluctuations in the property tax cap. It's not always like a bad thing. It doesn't always mean that you are losing money or in trouble, and I'll explain why. So the next slide here shows this is our anticipated building aid and property capital expenditures based on our current projects. So you can see the red is building aid, which is revenue coming in. And you can see it's stable. It goes from next year 4.9 to 5.3, and it kind of sits at that 5.3 range, which is good. The blue is the projected capital expenditures, which really means our debt service related to existing projects. Now you can see in the 26-27 school year, we're at 8.2 million, which is roughly where we are today. 27-28, it drops down to 6.5 million and stays at that level. So normally that's a good thing, right? So our income is staying the same, what we have building in coming in, the amount of money we have to spend is going down. So net, it's positive. But the reason why that correlates to the property tax cap going down is because each year you have debt service, that 8.2 million, that's spread between the 8.2 and the 5.3. That increases the property tax cap for that specific year. And then when that debt drops off, the tax cap associated with it goes off too. So it's not really a loss of money that we have to use to operate the funds of the school district. It's a reduction in the property taxes that the community is paying because that debt service dropped off. So I just wanted to explain that. Most people may understand it, but may not with just one time of hearing it. I will continue to kind of update that as these numbers are always changing, but I just wanted to early on give a projection in terms of what would be coming if nothing changed. So things do change year to year, so those numbers will all 100% change, but if everything stayed the same, that's the kind of tax cap kind of cycle you would say. Okay. Now 25-26 state aid. So the governor's budget did come out, so we have updated an analysis slide here. So the top line shows you our current state aid for 24-25 that we should be receiving by the end of the year. So it's roughly 68 million. And for anybody checking at home, that is the number that is reported on the governor's budget. Then the next line backs out UPK because that's reported in the special aid fund, not the general fund. And then we add in anticipated building aid. So that is from phase 5 projects that have completed. We've sent up the final cost reports, and we should be expecting that aid to be received toward the end of this year, so the $450,000. So that gives us our adjusted number of what we think we're going to get of $67.5 million. Now for next year, what's being built into the 25-26 budget, we do the same kind of process where it's the governor's budget number, 72,14202. We reduce the UPK, and then we add in that same amount of building aid because we will be receiving that in the following year as well. So that brings you to the adjusted amount of 78,52742. And what that represents is just over $3 million, almost a $3.4 million increase. At the last presentation, the UPK aid has stayed the same. And there was a question related to why it looks like it's going up a lot. And the answer is, which I provided last time, is it's a per pupil amount is UPK aid. So last year we were eligible for a similar $1.7 million worth of aid. Based on the number of students, there's a per pupil amount, and what we've actually utilized and what we've needed is approximately $1.2 million. So that is the expectation next year, because we're not expanding UPK, is what we'd actually bring in would be that roughly $1.2 million. So it's not necessarily like we're getting a lot more money. It's because it's based on per pupil amount. Okay. So next slide here, we're moving down from really revenue to looking at our reserves and fund balance. So this slide here we show every year. It shows total fund balance. So it's probably easiest if you start at the bottom, and you can see we have total fund balance, what our budget is, and the percentage of the budget that the reserves kind of encompass. So you can see this year we did go down to 16%, where we were normally around 20%. And the reason being is because we did use the capital reserve to fund the security vestibule project. So that was a $3.5 million proposition that we put up to vote last year, which we're going to be working on this summer. That's the reason for the reduction. The range of where we want to be is between like 15 and 20%. So we are still in the range of where we'd like to see the district's reserves. And each year, we do budget to use some of those reserves. So if you're looking at an individual line account, you'll see that some do go down and some do go up year over year, because we do budget to use the ones with higher balances, and we try to fund the ones that have lower balances. And one specific example is if you look at the teacher's retirement system, you can see over the past few years that's going up considerably because of the fact that it was a new reserve. We wanted to make sure we had some money in there in case we ever needed to use it. Whereas some of the ones that are a little bit more funded, like the employee benefits accrued liabilities, the first line, we've kept that stable or brought it down somewhat. Okay, the next slide here just shows you how we think about the reserve accounts in terms of like which ones to use, which ones to fund. So the reserve balance analysis here shows you expenses or average expenditures just to smooth it out, and then what the reserve balance is. So the employee retirement system, as I just mentioned, we have approximately 2 years of coverage based on our average expenses, whereas TRS, we're actually less than a year. We're almost a little bit more than half a year. So that's why we're deciding to put more money into that reserve account, because we do have a higher average expenditure. Workers' comp is also similar to ERS at 2 years. And again, those are both older reserve accounts that are pretty well funded at this point. EBLAR was the other example I gave. That one is a little bit different. We look at the total liability. So what that represents is the accrued balances for employees that we have to pay out contractually when they retire. We take a look at that each year, and then we look at it compared to the reserve we have to make sure it's properly funded. And you can see there, we're not totally funded, which is okay. You just don't want to be overfunded. So if we had those numbers flipped, we wouldn't want to see that. We wouldn't want to have more money than our total liability. So that we're in good shape. Okay, so last slide I have is just sharing kind of what's ahead before we pause for any questions that the board has. So the next budget presentation, March 4th, it's going to be all the non-instructional departments. So facilities, transportation, security, we'll do central office and technology. Then in April 8th, we're going to go over the instructional budgets, which includes curriculum and instruction, special education, and staffing as well. Then on the 22nd, we will do the budget adoption. And on May 6th, the budget will be available, although I do intend to have it available earlier than that. That's the date it has to be available by. We'll do the budget hearing on May 6th, and on May 20th is our budget vote and trustee election. So that's all the content that I had today. Are there any questions that I can help with?
Any questions from the board?
I'm not scared.
Just real quick, I think you said it last time. When is the Brennan contract due?
The Brennan is the end of next year. It's not this year, it's next year. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. On the pages. So when you're talking about the reduction in capital expenditures and state aid staying the same, I mean, and then we lose what we can ask for in tax increase, right? So we're looking at about
Correct.
like a 1.8 million reduction in expenses, and we lose about the possibility of a 1.6 increase in taxes, right?
Yeah, the expiration, so you can see I put a little note here. There's I believe they're from 2014. They're 1.7 million worth of bonds that are coming due that we fully paid off at that point. So that is what's dropping off in that 27-28 year.
So in 26, 27, we're going to lose a couple $100,000 in taxable cap, right? And then it goes up to 1.6 the following year because of negative or flat. But we have 1.8 reduction in expenses.
Yes.
I can check my math later, but
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So when it does drop off, and I want to be clear, it's only in that year. So, right, so 27-28 budget, because that year that debt service drops off, you no longer have that exclusion to raise the tax cap by. It doesn't have any impact on the compounding of the property tax cap in future years, because the 2% increase is always off of the base. It's not off of the exclusion. The exclusion gets wiped out and then readjusted. So it doesn't have a long-term impact.
right. On the anticipated state aid, we talked about next, 24, 25, right? You're talking about 25, 26, I should say. So we're thinking maybe 5%, but that's given that, we don't, hold homeless stays, and the Rockefeller Foundation study doesn't affect school aid, right?
Correct, yeah, so this is based off of the governor's proposal. So any changes in the legislative budget would change these projections. But as of right now, there were some updates that were accepted in the Rockefeller report, so this is inclusive of all of that.
Yeah, no, we've had a conversation. I was actually surprised at where we ended up, so that's good news.
Yes, it was good news.
And just on the reserve analysis, what's the recommendation for, like, the reserves, like for ERS, TRS? Comp, we've always been overfunded.
2 to 3 years worth of expenditures. That's why we look at it at like an average expenditure basis. So 2 to 3 years is the recommendation. And for the EBLR, the top one, employee benefit accrued liability, the recommendation is to be, at or below the liability amount,
Okay, cool.
not to exceed.
Thank you. That's very good. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, I wanted to thank Tiana and Frank. This is the first of many board budget presentations. All of our presentations are on the website, so if you have any questions or you wanted to see them and look at them further, there's a lot of numbers in there that Frank and Tiana pour over and spend the majority of their day in front of. And so for them, it becomes almost second nature. For a lot of us, it's a new language. So those numbers and those presentations will be on our website. And I like to just remind everybody in the community that if you have any questions on the budget or you have concerns, reach out to Frank's office. They're here to help you. So if we can help you understand some of those numbers or get a greater understanding of just the budget process, I'm volunteering Frank. Maybe I'll flash his email up on the website as well. But reach out to the office. They're here to help you because it is a challenge to see once a year and then make heads or tails of it. So thank you, Frank. Thank you, Tiana. Thank you to the Board of Education. We can return.
Yeah.
And actually, I should just say, too, while I'm thanking Frank and Tiana, they're the forward-facing people. There are a lot of people in the business office who help put those numbers together as well. So thank you to the entire business office team.
Yeah, so just, again, thank you. Ken already said that. We appreciate everything. These are really, just want everyone to know, come down, ask questions if you have any, like Ken said. This presentations are going to go on and on and on every single month. The presentations will all be put on the website, so please reach out. And we're going to go into executive session for purpose of discussing personnel issues, collective bargaining negotiations, and/or a legal matter. So just need a motion to go into executive session. We don't anticipate coming back into public. We actually have to come back into public officially, but not for any business.
Motion.
Motion, second? Second, all in favor? All right, have a great evening.